Hey, math friends, so our learning target today is that I can make and interpret histograms. So we're going to talk about what a histogram is. This is a histogram over here. It looks very much like a bar graph. There's a few things that are different about it. So what is a histogram? Well, as I just stated, it is a bar graph, that shows frequency of data values. The difference a little bit is that there are intervals that are the same size. So a couple of things that are different. One thing you'll notice that the bars touch each other. So there isn't a gap between like what is your favorite color and you write down the favorite color. The biggest difference though is that we have intervals here. So we don't know specifically how many. We just have a range of numbers from 0 to 9, how many in that range. We don't know how many sevens. We don't know how many eights like we would know in a stem and leaf plot or a data display that represents that. So that is what we mean when we call it intervals. This is what we're talking about. These are the intervals. So we don't know how many 32s we have. We just know how many in that range. So that's a histogram. It's like a bar graph, but it has intervals. The intervals are all the same size. So what we mean by that is down here, each of these are representation of 10 units. So that looks like 9 units to you, but it also includes 0. So each of these is equal. They're the same size, representing 10 units. So let's take a look at how we would analyze a histogram. So what are the steps of making a histogram? We can look to the right here. And we would basically just take the frequency table and we make sure that the range of these are equal. So this represents 1, 2, and 3. The next one represents 4, 5, and 6, and so on. Make sure that they're equal. There are the same number of data values in each. This means that the frequency means that occurred 11 times, 4 times, 0 times, 3 times, and 6 times. Okay. So we're talking about number of pairs of shoes owned in my class. So you can see that 11 was the frequency of 11 was the most common because 11 students in class raised their hand when I said, how many of you own between 1 and 3 pairs of shoes? 11 people raised their hand. So you can see down here, it's the longest bar. So we make a bar up to 11 and we shade it in. You can see that nobody voted for 7 to 9 pairs of shoes. So that's why we don't see a bar height at all. So the bar height technically is 0. No frequency. You notice that there's no space between the histogram. So that's how we take the data, is we just stretch out the bars like you would in a bar graph. So let's take a look at this example. The frequency shows the ages of people riding a roller coaster. Display the data in the histogram. So you can see that our ages are already set up for us in categories. They're already ranged by 10 units. So when I do that, then I'm going to make my bars down here, and I'm going to say ages 10 through 19, ages 20 through 29, ages 30 through 39, ages 40 through 49, ages 50 through 59, and those are my ages. Those are my intervals. That's what makes it a histogram. So all these bars will touch each other. For frequency, that means we have 16 people that said that. If we look at our frequency, 16 is our largest frequency. So we want to make sure that our frequency on the vertical axis has a maximum of 16. I'm going to try to go by twos here. Let's see if I can fit it. 4, 6, 8, not going to happen. 10. I'm just going to move some stuff around to make this happen, you guys. I don't really need that title because we're talking about ages of people that are riding the roller coaster. So we're going to squeeze this in. All right, here we go. So then 12, 14, and 16 is the frequency. So if we talk about the frequency of ages 10 through 19, we say that we had 16 people, as we surveyed their age, that rode the roller coaster between the ages of 10 through 19. We had 11 people that are the ages of 20 through 29. It's sometimes helpful to write your answer on the top, so then if you're a little bit sloppy with your work, or you're working off like me, I'm working off of using kind of a stylus or a mouse here, you can say what you mean, so you can still get credit for it if it doesn't look perfect. We had 5 students with a frequency of 30 to 39, ages 30 through 39. We had 2 students, ages 40 through 49. And we had 4, not students, I keep saying students, but clearly if somebody's 49 and is a student, that would be a little awkward as I'm in my 40s. So that's our ranges. Now let's analyze some things. It should make sense to you if we're talking age of roller coaster riders that our teenagers are going to be the highest frequency. That should make sense to you. Also, that's interesting is we see this dip that occurs, and then you notice it picks a little bit back up again in the 50s to 59. So maybe some people are in, grandparents or something like that that are starting to maybe bring grandchildren to the roller coaster. This over here would be frequency, which just means the number of riders. So that's a histogram. Everything down here is in a range. All the ranges or intervals are equal. They each represent a unit of 10, an age group of 10. That's a histogram. It's just like a bar graph, so it should be not super stressful. So let's do some analysis of the bar graph. In this bar graph, which is known as a histogram, this is the Daytona 500 winning speeds. So you can see all the winners over the course of time. What was the most common speed? Average speed over the course. So the average speed and the people that won. How many of the winning speeds are less than 140 miles an hour? Well, this is 140 miles an hour. So, boy, this one is kind of tough to read. I'm going to skip that one. Let's do this one. It's a little bit easier to analyze that. Maybe I'll do this one. I think we will do that one. All right. The histogram shows the number of hours that students in a class slept last night. So how many students slept less than 8 hours? So if we take a look at that, that would be 8, and that would be 2, and that'd be 8, and this one is a little bit hard to read, but I believe it's 3. How many students slept at least 8 hours would be 8 or more hours. So all of those students slept at least 8 hours. So we would say 11 students. And then likewise, how many students slept less than 12 hours? We would find that same bar graph and count them out. So less than 12 hours, here's my 12-hour mark. Less than that would be all of these below. So that would be 8, 8, and 2, which means we had 18 students that slept less than 12 hours, not equal to, less than. So that's how we would analyze that bar graph. Let's take a look at this. Which graph, A or B, is a histogram? So you're looking. Which is the histogram? The one on the left we call a bar graph. You did that in elementary school where we'd maybe do a survey of what's your favorite color, and you would draw your bar graph up. So you should have said that B is the histogram. You can see that there are intervals down here. You can see that the bars are touching, and so on. Describe the outliers in the data of the histogram. So the outliers mean what are the data amounts that just really doesn't fit in. So all of these are pretty common and are pretty much following the same trend. You see a giant gap that occurred here. We're talking test scores. Not very many kids, or no kids scored a test score there, and very few kids scored a test score here. So the outliers really would be the categories of 1 through 20, very, very few kids, and 21 through 40, no kids scored. So when we say outliers, we really mean like the outcast of the data. The data that just doesn't really fit in is sitting on that lower end there. That's good vocabulary for you there. And how can you tell when an interval of a histogram has a frequency of 0? We have a great example right here. We have a frequency of 0. That means that there's no bar at all. Which that's how you know, is that the bar isn't growing at all. It has a height of 0. So the bar has basically a height of 0. 0 students. All right, wrapping up histograms then. So display data in a histogram. I don't know that we need to do that again. Maybe we will finish with this question. The histogram shows the number of magazines read last month by students in a class. First thing I'm going to do is try to identify. This looks like 2 students, 15 students, 0 students, and it looks like 3 students. Okay, cool. Which interval contains the fewest data values? It looks like we're talking about how many magazines they read and how many students said they read that many magazines. So 4 to 5 magazines was the fewest interval. We have no students that read 4 to 5 magazines. How many students are in the class? Well, 2 voted for that, 15 voted for that, 0 voted for that, and 3 voted for that, which means that we have 20 students in the class. I wish 20 students. Wow, awesome. And what percent of the students read less than 6 magazines? Let's take a look at that. So less than 6. So if we draw our vertical line here at 6 magazines, all of these students read less than 6 magazines. So we would say 17 students. Cool. So our learning target today is histograms. Basically, we talked about this, creating the histogram. Remember, you need a title. You need labels. So in this case, we're talking about the states. And then you would set up your intervals here, which are given. This is the key, that the intervals are equal space. So 1 to 5 has the same space as 6 to 10, and so on. You draw your bars, you represent your data. That is the summary of a histogram. Pretty easy stuff. You could also calculate some data with that, but that's all we're going to do with this lesson. Have a glorious night.